up, everyone? Welcome to a brand new episode of Nightlight. I am so excited to be working on this video today. This is the highly requested, long-awaited video on my color pipeline. So I do apologize about the IT issues in my last video on my editing workflow. Because of some of those sound issues, I will be covering some of that editing workflow in this video before we jump into the color tab in Davinci Resolve 18.6. Understand the editing workflow that I go through before I jump into color grading. Please don't make the mistake of grading and then editing. There is a reason why the editing tab comes before the color grading tab in Davinci Resolve. It's because from a workflow perspective, you are supposed to edit, get those shots perfect, get the framing perfect before you jump into actually color grading. Now, before we get into color grading, I want to present some slides on color theory, the idiosyncratic nuances between the colors and how they evoke different emotions with your audience. All of that is very important foundational information that I wish someone had covered with me before I jumped into Davinci Resolve and started messing around with node trees. It's really important that you understand complementary colors, split toning. I'm going to be covering all of that today in the color theory section of the curriculum, as well as covering color correction, which is a necessary step before you even jump into color grading. Don't even think about applying a LUT or color grading before you've corrected your footage. So we'll be covering color correction as well as color grading. So sit back, relax, grab that cup of joe, and join me for a brand new episode of Nightlight. All right, so let's dive in. So first, I want to go over the chapter markers for those of you where this is remedial information. You really don't want to re-review it again and just have it regurgitated back to you over and over again. If you already know this stuff and you want to skip ahead to color grading, you want to just get right to the fun stuff, go ahead and do that. I've created chapters within this video for you to skip around. Here's a layout of the chapters. First, I'm going to talk about my experience in color grading at Night Studios. I will talk about my tech stack. So for those of you who are here to also understand what hardware, what tools I use, so you can possibly buy those same things or look at something to save up for, because a lot of this stuff, unfortunately, like the Blackmagic mini panel, those things are just not cheap. I'm going to talk about my tech stack with the system that I run Davinci Resolve on. I'm also going to cover a little of the issues I've ran into Davinci Resolve with my setup. For example, running SSDs over DAS, direct attached storage with Thunderbolt, to Thunderbolt hubs. So I'll be talking about that and how some of you may be able to prevent a lot of the crashing that's happening when you're trying to render in Davinci Resolve. So I'll cover a few of those things, but this is not meant to be a troubleshooting break fix video. I will just be talking about some of my experience and dealing with all of that. So we will jump into an overview of color grading. So what is color grading? Why do we do it? What's the purpose of color grading? We're going to talk about color theory. Again, this is foundational. I wish that someone would have talked to me about this. I wish someone would have helped me understand what is color grading? What is color correction? Why do we do it? What is the difference between the different complementary colors? What is a color wheel? All this stuff that I probably should have gotten in art class in high school, probably did, but forgot. But I'm going to go over color wheels. I'm going to go over complementary colors. I'm going to talk about all these things that you as a color grader should know, especially when you're doing things like split toning, things on why colors evoke certain emotions, what those emotions are, as well as some of the things that you should be using if you're going to be doing split toning. So for example, why do we use orange and teal? That's a very common split toning technique for a more cinematic grade. So we'll talk about color correction, we'll talk about color grading techniques. We're also going to talk about different cinematic looks. How do you achieve a cinematic? What does cinematic even mean? What does filmic mean? All of these things are what we're going to be covering in today's presentation. And then we're going to do a hands-on. I'm going to dive right into my color pipeline in Davinci Resolve. So without further ado, I've graded 5 different TV series at Night Studios now. I'm excited to announce that we're actually going to be going back on set to film a new season of Dark Ops. So I've had quite a bit of experience in color grading and editing, which is why I felt it was so necessary to teach this curriculum. In a way, also to teach myself. I find that I actually learn a lot by developing curriculum and teaching other people. I feel like it's really difficult to continue to further your education and build capacity if you're not able to teach a subject. I enjoy teaching. I love doing this. I want all of you to know my secrets and what you can do. And I want you to share yours. So go into the comments on this video. Let me know if there's something that you do differently and why. And I want this conversation in this video to continue into the comments. These are some of the hardware devices that I use in post-production. For my NLE, for those of you who are wondering, what software does Alyssa prefer? Is she a Premiere girl? Is she a Davinci Resolve girl? There's a reason why a majority of my videos are Davinci Resolve. I started out in Adobe Premiere and I got to a point where it had crashed so many times and I lost so much hard work that I just got sick of it. And I decided that, look, if I'm going to move fully into Hollywood and reinvent myself in Hollywood out of cybersecurity, I want to be using the tools that are sort of the de facto standard in Hollywood. And I would definitely say that Davinci Resolve is a de facto standard in color grading in Hollywood. So I wanted to move off. That's not to say that Premiere isn't used there too, but it is in a majority of the color houses. So with that being said, for those of you who are ready to key my car because you feel that Davinci Resolve isn't actually more stable or just as stable as Adobe Premiere, I get that it crashes too. No software is perfect. However, what I love about Davinci Resolve is the incremental saves. The fact that I'm confident that if Davinci Resolve crashes and I reopen it, pretty much a lot of my more recent activities in that timeline are going to be there because of those incremental saves. We will cover my Davinci Resolve project settings. I want to talk about that because I have some great advice and guidance there for those of you who are completely lost in your project settings and have no idea what these things mean. So I'm going to be covering that as well. I want to cover everything from cradle to grave. I don't want to just go in here and say, okay, everyone, this is the node tree that you need to replicate, and this is what you need to do. I want you to understand why I'm doing those things. I want you to understand what these settings do and how they affect your color pipeline. So I did start with Premiere. I moved to Davinci Resolve. I'm currently on the latest version of Davinci Resolve, which is 18.6. As far as hardware is concerned, a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, Mel bought me the mini panel from Davinci Resolve. I love it. It's definitely something that is an overkill, I feel, if you're going to be editing, for example, YouTube videos or something like that. However, if you are a Hollywood colorist, if you're coloring short films, if you're coloring features, TV series, whatever it may be, you'll find that taking the time to learn the mini panel and all of its nuances will really speed up your color pipeline moving forward. There is a learning curve you need to get over as far as learning how to use it and where the buttons are and what buttons are available for you and what buttons are not available to you versus something where you have to actually pick up the mouse and use it because it's just not available on the mini panel. However, having said that, I do have the mini panel. I have the Davinci Resolve Speed Editor, and that's right here. That has also sped up my editing workflow. I have the Wacom Cintiq Pro 24. You won't see it here on my desk because I have actually dismantled it. I am selling it for those of you who are interested. We do have a gear focus shop up, but I never really took to the Cintiq Pro. It just felt like I was editing on a massive iPad, and it wasn't for me. What I have moved to, which is why I'm wearing this glove, is the Wacom regular tablet, and this is the Intuos Pro. And I love it. The size that I got is pretty large. I want to say that this is the medium size. I think there's small, medium, and large, and this is the medium. I didn't want to go too big. I felt like desk real estate is very important to me, but I love the stylus. I love how it's positively impacted my color pipeline and workflow. If any of you are looking to get away from that claw hand from using a touchpad, when you're color grading, just spending 8-10 hours grading, you will come out with what I like to call claw hand. This is a great solution for that, so I would recommend it. And it's not too expensive. The Intuos Pro is definitely a lot cheaper than the Cintiq. I use the Mac Studio 2022. It's the M1 Ultra chip. It's fully loaded. It's basically the most upgrades you can get on that when that studio came out. It's the M1 Ultra chip with 128 gigs of RAM. I have a 32 core CPU and a 64 core GPU. The storage is very interesting. I want to talk about this for a minute. Okay, so I have completely eliminated spinning disks. For those of you who saw, I think it was my studio walkthrough video on this channel, I showed you the different 6 bigs that I had purchased. However, spinning disks just simply became too slow. I also was concerned not only just about the performance, but also the stability of it as well. So I completely removed the 6 bigs from my workflow, and I've now moved to OWC. I love their mantra about supporting the filmmaker. So I feel like when I'm buying hardware from OWC, that I'm buying purpose-built systems that were designed from the ground up for filmmakers, for either production on set, for our DIT, or in post-production for me as an editor and colorist. So I have the OWC Mercury and the Thunderblade. Actually, I have 2 Mercury M2s. These are NVMe, no spinning disks, all SSDs. It's definitely the fastest workflow that I've got and have ever used. I also have the SanDisk Pro Dock 4. You'll see that over here in figure 7, and it is fully loaded. I actually ended up buying both the readers for our Red Komodos and for our Red V-Raptor. Now, there is no cartridge, at least right now, for our Arri cameras. So we are actually still using the codecs reader for the Arri camera, for our Arri Mini LF. So those are the different arrays that I have for disk storage. Right now, I want to say that the Thunderblade is an 8 terabyte and the Mercuries are each individually 16 terabytes. The thing about SSD, if you move away from spinning disk to SSDs, you are talking about a jump in price. Right now, SSDs are still, they're getting cheaper and they have been getting cheaper over time, but they're still pretty cost prohibitive when you're talking about a 16 terabyte SSD, 32, 64, 128. You're talking about buku bucks when you're talking about that much in NVMe. Now, one of the things that I do have, and I'll talk about this here in a moment, is I do have a 25 gig fiber connection to my computer. Yes, those numbers, that's not a typo, that's not a misspeak. 25 gigabit fiber going from, it's single mode fiber going from my data center closet downstairs in our cabinet. And I actually posted a short of that server cabinet so you can see it. It's all Ubiquiti equipment, but basically we ran 25 gig fiber from the 25 gig switch downstairs directly into my Mac Studio. Now, some of you are probably wondering, Alyssa, how the hell did you do that? There's not a 25 gig card in there. So I actually bought the OWC Helios. It's an external PCIe. Go check it out. It is super cool. I ended up doing a lot of research and trying to find the best 25 gig fiber NIC that I could to pop into it, and then connect that over Thunderbolt 4 to my computer, and it's blazing fast. I've never used a 25 gig network before, and it's astronomically cool. It's super cool. Now, what I am dealing with right now, and you're probably wondering, okay, Alyssa, why did you do that? The purpose is because all of the NASs that we have in the house are downstairs in the server closet. And I, especially in a lot of you, hashtag editing life, hashtag set life, as many of you know, space is a commodity. It's a concern, right? Space is a concern. When you're dealing with Red V-Raptor 8K RAW R3Ds, when you're dealing with 6K Komodo, when you're dealing with Arri RAW, you're talking about a lot of space consumption. So I actually don't have one, but 2 different NAS appliances downstairs. Now they are spinning disks. That is where I'm bottlenecking on IO right now, is the fact that they're all spinning disks. However, I am building an SSD NAS. Yes, I said it. I'm building an SSD NAS. I'm super excited about that. I think I might actually make a video on that. There really aren't that many videos on building an SSD NAS. Now, some of the things I will warn you about on my channel, I am not a budget-friendly channel. I will say that again. And some of you are probably thinking it. I am not a budget-friendly channel. I do not go for the cheap. When I'm dealing with what I'm doing in my day-to-day workflow and my color pipeline and just in my life in general, I always go out and spend the additional money to buy the best. I don't want to have to deal with buying cheap stuff simply just because of concern over paying $50, $1,000, $10,000 more, because I want to get the best. I want to be able to rely on it, and I want to know that it's going to stand the test of time and the rigors of what I put it through. So I will warn you, if for those of you who are very budget conscious, a lot of the things that I cover on my channel are not cheap. And they're not for everyone, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you are a YouTube editor, if you are a YouTube colorist, I'm not saying that in a derogatory way. I'm just saying that it doesn't make sense to buy something that's like a $5,000 or even the ultra advanced panels like $10,000, $100,000 when you're color grading YouTube videos. It just doesn't make sense. It's not economical. However, if you work in Hollywood, if you are a colorist in Hollywood, if you are working on films, on features, on shows, then maybe my opinion on these different products will be valuable to you. This is the diagram of everything we're running in our DIT cart as well as our editing room. So I do want to talk about this. A lot of people, when I covered this in my last video, found it very valuable. So I want to talk about it some more. Let's start with the DIT cart. So we are using the innovative cart. It's the Voyager 36 Evo. In that cart, we have an 8 terabyte Thunderblade. The Thunderblade moves between my editing desk and the DIT cart. For those of you who aren't aware, DIT stands for Digital Imaging Technician. They're responsible for configuring all of the cameras, making sure they're all matched up, and also they're in charge of the data wrangler and making sure that all of the data and the footage is copied. 2 is 1, 1 is none. But makes multiple copies of your data and make sure that it's safe. So I want to give my DIT, Steve Hoyt, I want to give Steve the best possible equipment he can have. Now, okay, I know what some of you are saying. Alyssa, is that an Apple Mac Pro 2019? Yes, it is. It's better than giving him a mini Mac or something like that. Look, we tried to sell it and we couldn't find any buyers. So I was like, look, you know what? We spent so much money on this thing and we've upgraded it to the max and we need to do something with it. So let's give it to Steve and it'll be better than a, consumer PC. All right. So having said that, we have the Thunderblade, which is what he uses to dump cards to. Now, I want to emphasize this again. I talked about in my last video, 2 is 1, 1 is none, meaning that when Steve is dumping cards, he never dumps it to just one device. He always copies that to different devices. So he'll copy to the Thunderblade, and in parallel, he will also copy at the same time to the OWC Mercury. Now, because they aren't spinning disks, this happens relatively fast. It's not like he's standing there all day just dumping one chip. On set, you want your DIT to be able to dump chips as fast as possible. That's why I would never recommend putting spinning disks on set. Your APC 1500 volt smart UPS, he has been able to continue dumping cards when we had to move off location in our van. So we have a little workstation area set up for him where he can just run off of the APC and just continue to dump cards. We have a 1025 gigabit Ubiquiti network switch in the DIT cart, so he can run over Ethernet if he wants to, or even fiber, because it has fiber NIC ports on it as well. And the DIT software stack that we use on set is from a company called Pomfret. It's Pomfret Silver Stack. And what Silver Stack does is it not only allows you to reliably copy files. Don't think he's just using Finder, macOS Finder, to copy files. He's not doing that. What tools that are purpose-built for DITs to dump chips for will do is they will hash the files and make sure that those files arrive at their intended checksum. So it'll do a checksum of the original file and then a checksum of the destination file and make sure that it wasn't corrupted in transit and that it was reliably copied. And what's neat about Silver Stack is it will actually copy to multiple destinations for you and you won't have to deal with that. Okay, so once all of the footage is dumped on set, we're going home for the night. I'm ready to then copy them to the NAS in our studio, actually multiple NAS appliances. I will use silver stack again. Now, this is an architecture drawing of what is sitting right here on the floor next to my desk. I can bring the camera over here, but if you want to see it, it's in my studio tour video on my YouTube channel if you want to check that out. For those of you who are obsessed with studio walkthroughs and desk tours, I have a video on it. I do need to update it. There have been some changes, but it's pretty true to the current state. So I talked about this already. I've got the Helios 3S, and then I have an FS 25 gigabit Ethernet NIC in there. It's the fiber NIC. So that's the current system build. That's the Mac Studio. Then we've got the OWC appliances attached to it. I've got a patch panel up here because I do have so many devices. I actually have appliances or devices on my desk that are actually running off of power over Ethernet. So I have a PoE Ubiquiti switch up here that is powering my phone, and it's also powering the mini panel. For those of you who are wondering, the mini panel does not need to be powered by a regular electrical IPC cord. You can, or sorry, IPC. You can use power over Ethernet to power this puppy. I love that about the mini panel. So that and my VoIP phone, yes, I'm one of those weirdos with a VoIP phone on my desk as well, and that's powered by PoE. All right, so let's talk about color grading. What is it? Why do we do it? I'm going to quickly summarize what color grading is, and then I'll talk about why we do it. Post-production process of adjusting and enhancing the colors, tones, and overall visual appearance of motion picture to achieve a specific mood, style, or narrative. That is the point of color grading. It's to be able to use color to evoke, even luminosity, to evoke a mood with your audience, to make them feel a certain way beyond the acting, beyond the story arc, beyond the character arcs. You are responsible for creating a look that will resonate and strike a visceral chord with the audience. And we do that through color grading. Now, why we color grade? Why do we color grade? It enhances the visual aesthetics. It creates visual appeal for more vibrant, cinematic, and visually stunning images. And I have an example in figure 8 there. I think that's Mad Max. Yeah, that's Mad Max. Where you can see a difference between log versus graded. When you capture a log image off of your camera, for those of you who are mobile filmmakers and you're using your iPhone to film a movie, which isn't that far-fetched. Remember, everyone, there have been feature-length films filmed entirely on an iPhone. Tangerine, if none of you have heard of that, that is a feature-length film that got a lot of press, which covers LGBTQ issues, trans issues, and that was filmed entirely on an iPhone. I will give credit to the iPhone filmmakers out there. But if you have an iPhone and you have a Pro, you can record and log. And so color grading, when you're capturing a log image, whether it's an Arri or an iPhone, it's going to look flat. It's not going to be vibrant. There's not going to be contrast. It needs work. It needs some TLC. And that's what our job as colorists is to achieve. Next, it's to set the mood. Colors have a profound impact on the audience's emotional and psychological response. Did I put physiological? Is it physiological or psychological? I need to look that up. Anyway, a visceral response to the film. It enables you to set the mood and tone of a scene. Now, I put an example here of orange and blue. These colors, like for example, when you see oranges, reds, you feel a sense of warmth. You feel a sense of sort of protection and coverage and warmth. Whereas with blue, it may evoke a sense of coldness. It may evoke a sense of isolation, fear. You know, a lot of the horror movies will use, you know, an orange and teal sort of color and look to their film for those very reasons. The other reason we color grade is to create consistency. Various factors such as lighting, camera settings, and the environment can create different shots. Grading creates a consistent look and feel throughout the film, which is also referred to as shot matching. I put an example in figure 10 here where you can see 4 different images created by 4 different cameras. Now, this is a great example of creating consistency. It's the same shot, everyone. It's the same exact shot, but it's different sensors, different cameras. Every sensor from Arri to Red to your iPhone, they all capture colors in different ways, what's referred to as color science. Every single camera has different color science. A lot of people prefer the skin tones created by an Airy. There's people in a religious debate who feel red has the best skin tones, but every single camera has its own color science. Color grading is used to also tell a story. It can be used to signify a change in the story arc or a character arc. For example, in a film going from a desaturated look to a convergence of a completely oversaturated look, you can tell a story with your color grades. You have so much power in your hands as a colorist. So that's why I want to talk about this. That's why I want to make sure that all of you understand this. It may be boring. It's not as sexy and fun as being in Davinci Resolve and the node trees, but this is important for you to understand as the foundation and basis before you start grading. Time and place. It can convey a change in time or decade. I can't remember the name of the movie. Maybe it was The Fabelmans. Was it The Fabelmans? Where in the beginning part of the movie, it was in this 1960s. And so there was a different grade with that part of the film. The colors weren't as vibrant. It was a very 1960s look. And then fast forward to present day, you see this vibrancy, you see this modern sort of warm kind of feel to it, and that conveyed a change in time and decades. It can also correct problems in production. You can have situations where maybe the DIT forgot to or did not properly match the white balance or the exposure, temperature, and even color casts. Color cast is when like a fluorescent light bulb or something can cause a change in color that just doesn't look right. Or color cast can also be green off of a green screen being cast onto the backs of your talent. That's another example of color cast or color spill. So all of this stuff can happen. We had this happen in one of our shows where and I don't know why they did this. I hate it, but we have a DTAP hub connected to our Airy, and there's a little blue light on it to indicate that there's power, and that blue light was shining right onto the face of our talent. I'm going to warn you, this part is not exactly sexy. It is kind of boring. I don't find it boring. I find it incredibly crucial. It's important to cover. I need all of you to understand this, okay? So take notes, understand it, because this is going to be so important in your career as colorists. All right, so color theory, it's fundamental concept in art, design, filmmaking that explores how colors interact with each other, how they're perceived, and the emotional and psychological effects they have on people. This is pretty much the tenet of color theory. All right, it's power to evoke a visceral response from the audience who's looking at it to change how they feel. It plays a crucial role in conveying emotions, themes, and even messages. So again, the colors you choose, whether you're doing a split tone or anything, the look you're creating can affect all of those things. Now, I want all of you to understand what the primary colors are, what the basics of color theory is, and that there's three colors: red, blue, and yellow. Now, those are the three colors some of you may find surprising about this. Those three colors cannot be created by mixing any other colors. That's why they call them the primary colors. It's not RGB. It's not red, green, blue. It's red, blue, yellow. Those are the three colors that are in and of itself their own color. They cannot be created by mixing colors. Colors, basically, when mixed together, create what's called secondary colors. Secondary colors is mixing red and yellow to form orange, blue and yellow to form green, and blue and red to create purple. And so I created a diagram for you over here on the right-hand side. These are your primary colors. Your secondary colors are what happens when you mix these two colors together. And now some of you may find this surprising. It was definitely surprising to me. I didn't know there was a tertiary type color, which are intermediate colors. Intermediate colors are created when the secondary colors and primary colors mix to form a new color. Those intermediary colors are over here. So you have like red, orange, green, blue. These are the tertiary colors that are formed from these primary and secondary colors. The color wheel I don't have a diagram here. I think I just drew this circle around that, but basically it's a visual representation of the relationships between the primary, secondary, and intermediate colors. It explains color harmonies and contrast. The color wheel is just basically what I created here. It's a mixture of the primary, secondary, and intermediate colors formed in the basis of a circle. So here's an example of a color wheel. So, you have yellow, yellow, green, green, blue, green, blue. As you can see, it's just basically a culmination of all of those different colors that I covered in primary and secondary colors that I showed you here. Okay, next let's talk about color harmonies. This is important for you as colorists to understand how colors are complementary to each other, so you don't break that rule. Colors that are analogous to each other, and what are called triadic colors. Color harmonies are combinations of colors that are visually pleasing to the human eye. Color combinations that are visually pleasing include these three things: the complementary colors, which are opposites on the color wheel. So if you look at the color harmonies right here, these are visually pleasing color combinations. So here you have complementary, they're directly opposite from each other on the color wheel. You have split complementary, which sort of forms this triangle where green, blue, and red are combined together to create a very complementary and pleasing color combination. Then you have split complementary, analogous, triadic. The triadic is a much wider triangle than split complementary, but it includes these three colors. Then you have tetradic, square, and then monochromatic. Again, it's important that you understand the opposites of the colors on the wheel, the colors that are adjacent, and then colors that are equally spaced across from each other. And if any of you can notice, you see why orange and teal are very common split toning is because they are visually pleasing. They are a color harmony of two different colors. Now, I talked a little bit about this before, where a particular color will evoke a specific response from your audience, whereas these colors right here, yellow, orange, and red, can evoke a warm feeling, a sense of warmth or energy or passion. Emotion for this would be cool. So combining purple, blue, and green together can evoke a sense of coldness, sadness, or even peace, something that's serene or peaceful. Okay, so let's talk about saturation. This is important in color theory as well. When we refer to saturation, we refer to the intensity of a color or the purity of a color. This is vivid and bold, while desaturated colors are muted and subtle. I have an example here where you have an original shot, right? Looks pretty muted, right? It's the colors aren't very vibrant. It's pretty dull. Then you have a completely desaturated look where it pretty much becomes black and white and grayscale, right? So that's desaturated. And then you have a fully saturated shot here where you can see a clear delineation between the browns and the greens. You've got some white in there on the bench. You have the color distinction between the sky and the shrubs. So you have this clear delineation between the different colors in a fully saturated image. Color correction. Right, so we just covered color theory, talked about complementary colors and how colors work together to be able to tell a story or evoke a certain mood. Now let's talk about color correction. Color correction is a necessary evil. It's a necessary step for you to take before you color grade. Do not make the mistake of jumping right into color grading without first doing color correction. I have seen people do this. You can see shots where people applied a LUT and it came out looking awful, god awful, because they didn't do color correction beforehand. You must color correct before you apply your look or create your look. So how do you do color correction? What is color correction? What are the steps in doing it? First, you need to correct your exposure. Luminosity, the exposure, the lightness. Make sure that is properly exposed. And you can rely on your scopes to be able to determine if something is clipping, if you're clipping your blacks or clipping your whites, if it's overexposed or underexposed. Rely on your scopes. Don't rely on your human eye. That's what the scopes are there for. And we will talk about scopes and how to properly use them. I will cover every scope, I promise. Parades, all of it. Correct the exposure. That's number one. Once you're done correcting the exposure, you want to balance the white balance. Balance the WB. Correcting the white balance is important to make sure that your whites are whites, that your blacks are blacks, just making sure that the white balance is accurate. Different types of lighting on set will create different types of white balances. You also have nuances between different cameras if you're shooting with different cameras where white balances just may be completely off. Hopefully on set you're using a card within the camera to try and set that white balance automatically to make sure they're all matched up. But again, you want to make sure that your white balance is properly set, that your whites are whites, because those are the things that are going to stick out with your audiences when the whites are not truly white. You want to achieve consistency next, meaning that you want to shot match. So on set at Night Studios, we'll typically use multiple cameras. So we'll have an Arri as camera A, camera B is the V-Raptor, and camera C is the Komodo. And I have the job as the colorist to make sure that all three of those in post-production are all shot matched. In addition to achieving consistency across the shots, you want to make sure that you enhance your color accuracy. You want to make sure that your colors are accurate. Are the greens green? Are the purples purple? Is everything the way it should look according to the human eye? If you're looking at your backyard, and your grass should be green, the sky should be blue, the tree trunk should be brown. Make sure in color accuracy that when you're doing color correction, that all of these colors are what they should actually be and are vibrant. Are, a log image is very dull. It's not vibrant at all. So applying vibrance or increasing that vibrance in color correction is important. Fix your color cast. We talked about this. You can have color cast from different types of lighting, indoor lighting versus outdoor lighting, color spill off of something that's spilling onto your talent. Those are fixing color casts. Next, you're going to want to create a natural look. Does it look natural? Does it look artificial, or does it look natural? Remember, color correction isn't yet applying that creative look. It has nothing to do with creative looks. It's making sure that that image, if you're looking at a house, if you're looking at a person, that everything looks natural in the real world as you would see it if you were looking at that person. Next, you're going to want to prepare for color grading, and that's ensuring that your base image correction, especially before applying your LUTs, is done. And that's basically this flow chart I have here. Again, correct your exposure, balance the white balance, achieve consistency, fix color cast, create a natural look, and then prepare for grading. Let's go ahead and look at what an original shot looks like compared to a color corrected shot and then a color graded shot. So for those of you who are like, Alyssa, I just don't understand the difference between color correction and color grading. You can take a shot and tell someone, hey, I graded this. But if it's not graded, if it doesn't have a look to it, a unique look, then it's probably just color correction and you don't know the difference. So here's the original shot out of the camera. This is a color corrected shot where it looks natural. It looks as it should be. You don't have much vibrancy here, but it looks natural. And then in the final color graded shot, you're really bringing the vibrance out. You're bringing out the vibrance in the grass. You're bringing out, look at that sky here compared to the sky here. You have a lot more blues, whereas this is more of a red shot. This shot's a lot more red. There's a lot more reds there. So you have a much more vibrant sky, vibrant mountains. You have a lot of vibrancy out here on the foothills. So this is just a lot more pleasing. It's a lot more cinematic. Okay, let's talk about color grading. So if I told you, hey, Lisa, or hey, Jen, go color correct. Now you know, based on the steps I just taught you, what that means. What does it mean to color correct? I gave you those steps. Now what if I were to tell you, hey, Dan, hey, Lisa, go color grade. Do you really know, without looking at this slide, do you really know what that means? Like, what does it truly mean if I send you on a test to load up Davinci Resolve and then color grade it? Are you covering all of the methodologies in color grading? Are you performing all of the typical steps that you would go through in developing a look? We're going to go through that right now. So for those of you who have been wanting a Bible, a workflow, a color pipeline, this is it. First, adjust your contrast. Do you need to increase it or decrease it in your color grading? Next, you want to make sure you boost your saturation, or do you need to decrease that saturation that sort of thing. Most of the time, I would imagine pretty much everyone I'm speaking to the audience is hopefully filming in log, Rec 709 or whatever it may be, Red Raw or Black Magic Raw, which is B Raw. That shouldn't really be an issue. Also, I want to make this abundantly clear. You don't have to necessarily get white balance correct and accurate in production on set. In the end, it really doesn't matter because you're actually filming in RAW. If you're filming RAW and you're not burning in a LUT on set, which hopefully none of you are doing, that's a bad idea. I would never recommend that unless, you know, your Colorist has given you a show LUT and you're probably using it as a display LUT. So we at Night Studios have a display LUT, a show LUT, which we load onto our cameras, and I, as the director, can watch it into what kind of would look like or represent in post-production because we've applied that same LUT we created on the cameras. So, you know, make sure that you boost or desaturate that saturation. But again, if you're recording in RAW or log, that really doesn't matter. It just means more work for you in post. If a lot of the stuff is off, it's just not the end of the world. You can fix it in post. I know a lot of colorists hate that, fix it in post, but in this particular case, it's very beneficial. Next, you're going to want to adjust for the highlights and shadows and enhance them. Highlight recovery, bring back detail in overexposed areas by recovering highlights. This is really where the power of your cinema cameras come in. Also, the 17 stops of dynamic range that the V-Raptor has, that sort of thing. If you are using a very good cinema camera, has high dynamic range, that sort of stuff, if it's blown out, you should be able to fix it in post. The more dynamic range that the camera has, the more capability that you have to be able to expose for like two different things. For example, your talent and maybe outside the window that's behind them. Lift your shadows, reveal hidden details in darker areas of the image. If any of the image is underexposed, it was just really poor lighting, especially now with the NLEs and artificial intelligence and AI, you actually can relight the scene with lights that you create in post, a feature that's available in pretty much the major NLEs now, but for sure I know Davinci or Resolve has it. So you have this relight feature where you can relight particular areas using a new virtual light that you add to the scene. Next, you can use the color wheels, your curves to adjust the lightness and the colors, or LUTs, if you have a LUT, to adjust the balance of highlights, midtones, and shadows. Now we will talk about that. It's pretty much your three primaries wheels. Those three things are the things that you'll typically hear colorists, especially other colorists on YouTube who have similar channels to mine, who are talking about color grading tutorials and how to do things. You're talking about, you know, pushing up or down the highlights, midtones, or the shadows. Adjust the hue, saturation, and lightness. This would be next. So isolate and adjust specific colors within the image using HSL controls. HSL controls allows you to pretty much isolate a particular color range and adjust or affect just that one area of either hue, saturation, and lightness. So these HSL controls are incredibly powerful, and it allows you to manipulate just one particular area of an image. And you can combine that, or there's other ways to do it, for example, with power windows and also masking. And we'll talk about that as well, but just understand that you do have HSL controls available to you. Next is split toning. This is where you apply different colors to the highlights and the shadows independently. A great example of this, we talked about this, is the orange and teal look. That's an example of split toning. Next, make a targeted adjustment to the image using power windows and qualifiers. So in addition to the other methods that I discussed previously, you do have the ability to draw what's called a power window around a specific area of the image. I love power windows. I start to get a little worried when I'm using masks. Yes, AI has made masks a lot more accurate. I don't fully trust them. I will try it. I will see how good of a mask I can get. I'm just so afraid of using masks, magic masking. So put in the comments if you agree or disagree, but I would rather use a power window. Another thing is qualifiers. I'd much rather make adjustments, fine-tune adjustments with qualifiers. I try and steer away from magic masks. Isolate changes to color, luminance, and other criteria using keying and qualifiers. Again, you can use your keying, and then we discuss qualifiers as well. And then blend modes. I've seen people who didn't have the budget to hire a VFX artist. I feel like in today's world with Fiverr and Upwork and these other types of sites where you can reach pretty much hire VFX artists for pretty much like $25, no one really has an excuse in micro budget filmmaking and small budget filmmaking to say, oh, well, we couldn't afford a VFX artist. Go on Fiverr, you can get a really great VFX artist who will take care of this for you. But my point is, with blend modes, I've seen people put out shows, put out movies that were low budget, and what they did was they just purchased access to like VFX sites. I think one of the big ones that I use, for example, is Action VFX, but they'll get their hands on, smoke or that fire that comes out of a gun when you're shooting it, right? They'll download that and then place it onto their footage, but they won't understand blend modes and they won't do any kind of blending with it. And it looks so bad. I can't tell you how bad it looks. It will destroy a film. Know what you're doing with blend modes. They are so powerful. It's being able to take multiple layers and combine them together. Adjustment layers, nodes. You can use blending modes on different things within Davinci Resolve and just know how to use them. There's different types of blending modes. There's normal, multiply, screen, overlay, soft light, hard light. And a lot of those VFX sites will tell you what blending mode to use. So again, I don't understand why some people have challenge here. The point of this is hopefully clear. When you are making any kind of radical changes or adjustments, just understanding color grading a little goes a long way. All right. I know some people just take, if they've got the mini pen, they'll just take the ball and just like fly through a radical change, or just over drag a color in the primaries or whatever, and just overdo it. Make small adjustments and then don't be afraid to zoom in. Make sure that you haven't cracked or broken any images. I've hired colorists that horribly broke images because they really just didn't realize what they were doing. They were trying to isolate colors and they just went too far with it and it broke the image. I'll demonstrate that in the Davinci Resolve portion of that about how to break an image so you can avoid it. But the point of this slide is, don't be afraid to zoom in. Use your zoom function, zoom in 300%, really look at the area of the image that you're wanting to affect and make sure that you haven't broken anything in doing it. Zoom out, zoom in, and disable a node. If you make a bunch of changes, enable, disable. It's on Mac, it's Command D. So just enable, disable node. Look at what changes you've made to it. Sometimes you're making them so slowly and they're so minute that you don't really fully realize the changes you're making until you disable that node and re-enable it and take a look again. All right, I want to talk about ShotDeck. Now, they are not a sponsor of this video. I just am obsessed with ShotDeck. I talked about this in my last video as a place that I go to instead of spending days or weeks, in many cases weeks and months, on storyboards. It saves me so much time. I just take each scene and I go to ShotDeck and I find an exact scene, that same scene that we're shooting, and I will get inspiration and get ideas for where to block actors, how I want to light it. All of these things are in ShotDeck. So here's an example where I pulled a shot from Top Gun Maverick. By the way, my favorite movie is Top Gun. But so, this gives you information on the genre, the director. It talks about the format. It gives you even what type of lens and aspect ratio was used. You even have a color strip here that tells you what, color combinations were used. Here they're saying a desaturated cyan and blue look was used. It gives you the story location. It gives you details on the lenses they used. Here, a Fujinon Premier lens was used, Sigma Cine lenses were used, and Zeiss Master Primes were used. So I love ShotDeck. I am a huge supporter, and hopefully one day they'll sponsor my channel, but love ShotDeck. Okay, let's talk about my color pipeline, and then I promise we're going to dive into Davinci Resolve. So you made it. You survived color theory, you survived color correction, and now we're talking about my actual pipeline. All right, I want to talk about this for a minute and explain it. These are swim lanes where I modeled out the pre, the clip, and the post group. When I talk about pre-clip and post, I'm talking about groups within the color page on Davinci Resolve. These are so powerful. It's surprising to me how many people I run into who don't use groups or don't know about it. Groups allows you to take multiple clips within your timeline and group them together. Maybe it was the same camera, same shot, same angle, and you can group them all together and apply a grade that affects all of them within the pre and the post group. So I will always use groups. It is, to me, work smart, not hard. For me, this is working smart, affecting multiple clips the same way because it was pretty much the same lighting. There's no reason to individually grade 1,000 clips like that unless something outside of the pre and post group that affects every clip in the group for some reason looks really wonky on a particular clip. That's when you go into the clip node and then make adjustments there within the nodes in the clip view. Now, this is a complete rework of the node trees that you saw in my editing video in the last episode of Nightlight. So take a note, this is a brand new tree. I pretty much started over and created a brand new one from scratch because there were a lot of nodes that I just wasn't using. My node tree is a culmination of node trees from some of the biggest Hollywood colorists all the way to some of the courses I've taken, books I've read. So it's taking the best of all of these different color graders from these different color houses and then trying to come up with the best of all of those. Not just one approach, but multiple approaches across different people that makes sense to me. So within the pre-group, I have a noise reduction. So first I'll reduce any noise. Then I have what's called an IDT or input device transform. So what IDT does is it takes all these different shots that were created natively on all these different sensor types and color sciences, and it creates some uniformity, allowing you to work within one single color space. Then I adjust for luminance. So I may, at this point, adjust the luminosity of it, the lightness, either if it was underexposed or if it was overexposed. This is where I'll adjust it, is in my luminance node. And then I'll adjust for color balance. This is where I'm doing color correction. All this is, by the way, I haven't even talked about color grading yet. This is just color correction. It's color balancing it to make sure that it looks natural. All right. Then once the balance node is adjusted, I'll head over to my clip node and I'll talk about how you can use shots, taking a still and put those into a power group to be able to apply those to any future project. But I'll hop over to my clip view. And then if for any reason, any clip within that group still has this wonkiness around luminance or white balance, I'll adjust them at the clip level. This is an opportunity where within that clip view, you can affect just that one clip you're working on. So I'll change the luminance, the white balance, the contrast. I'll adjust, and this is where my look comes into play, where I'm actually creating my creative look. This is where grading happens. So once this happens for color correction and this happens, then I'm going to actually get into my color grading. Then I'll go into 3 parallel nodes and I'll add more if I need it. But this is where my qualifiers come in, where I can make specific, what I like to call sniper adjustments versus a shotgun approach where you're trying to kill everything or adjust everything all at once. With my qualifiers, it's more of a sniper surgical approach to adjusting for different colors. Then I'll take that and mix it in across all of these different parallel nodes. I have a vignette, a spotlight, where I'll spotlight the actor. These are super important and something I never really used that much very early on, but you'll see it in our newer episodes where I spotlight the talent because you're really wanting to draw the audience's attention towards a particular area of the screen, whether it's the lead actor or if there's multiple people in the scene and only one person has dialogue. Using Spotlight allows you to adjust the luminosity, the lightness of that character, of that talent that you want to draw the audience's attention to and have them kind of subconsciously ignore everything else that's kind of going on. So use these different nodes to be able to adjust for create a vignette where maybe you want to darken some of the outside edges of the shot. Don't overdo the vignette. Do not overdo the top, bottom, left, or right. I've seen it where people just went it was overkill and it looked bad. You just don't see that. When have you seen a situation unless it was purposely done for like a dream sequence or something like that, where in a feature film or a TV show where they just overkilled the vignette. It just doesn't look right. It doesn't look filmic at all. Then I pass that over into two different nodes that I have created for director photography. This is where, for example, if I've hired a director for a particular show, or I have multiple DPs and the DP wants to tell me that they want a specific look applied, I will isolate that look to their own nodes. So for example, in my situation, I'm the director, I'm the editor, I'm the colorist. So you could even create a node here for colors if you've hired a colorist or a color house. You can have that specific colorist look applied to just that node. So it isolates their changes from the rest of mine. By the way, for those who aren't aware, it does matter what order that you put your nodes in. For example, I wouldn't take the director and DP nodes and move them over here before all my changes, because if they have specific changes that they want to make to my look, all of this stuff has to happen first because they want changes to my look that I've created and my color correction. So why would I have those nodes before mine? It's going to affect everything after it. So just understand that when you create parallel nodes, when you create serial nodes, first in, first out, FIFO, right? That concept, for those of you who came from an IT world, FIFO, it matters what order these nodes come in. So once all of these are applied, you then get passed down into my post group where I have an output data transform, and that's where I'm doing a conversion from my working color space into Rec 709, okay, for delivery. Next, after the ODT node, I then pass it over to glow, halation, and grain. This is where I'm adding more spice, more of a look and feel that resembles, is more emblematic of a film camera. So I'll add film grain, I'll add halation. And for those of you who don't know what halation is it's that really beautiful sort of halo effect around neon lights, like a neon sign or a light in general. With film cameras versus digital is very over sharpened. You'll hear people talk about that, like, oh, I can tell that was filmed on an iPhone, or that shot was taken on an iPhone because it's just so sharp, right? So film cameras back in the film days, when everything was shot on film wasn't sharp. It had a look to it where it was kind of fuzzy, or it just wasn't sharpened like you see with today's Android and iPhones, but it had this sort of soft look to it. And you can achieve that film look by applying these changes, adding a glow effect, adding a halation effect. And believe it or not, DaVinci Resolve has halation. Instead of you having to do that manually, there's a filter for halation. And then you have the final image export. Okay, so you did it. You survived. You made it through color theory, which might have been a snoozer for many of you. You made it through color grading. You made it through my pipeline. Hopefully, even for you senior colorists out there who are working at Hollywood color houses, for those of you who've been doing this for an entire lifetime as your career, did you learn something new? Let me know. Put in the comments. It'll totally make my day. Let's continue this conversation in the comment thread, and then let's pause. I'm going to urge all of you to go out there, hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet, hit that like button, help me boost the community here on the Nightlight channel, and tell your friends about it. Let me know if I'm adding value to your pipeline, if I'm adding value to your workflow. So let's go ahead and dive right into DaVinci Resolve. All right, it's here. I understand the last video that I did on editing, I had some sound issues. However, I am now going to refilm all of that editing workflow in this video, as well as cover the color grading portion. So this will be a longer video than normal, but it will be jam-packed with all of the editing workflows from the last video, and it'll combine the color grading that all of you were looking forward to. So before I get into that, I want to quickly cover again the schematic for how I lay out my timeline. A lot of you have put comments on the video regarding my timeline. I want to dissect this with you so you fully understand how I approach multicam with timecode syncing, different takes, different scenes. If you go on YouTube, there's no videos on this. There's videos on doing multicam. Okay, I get it. All right, all of you can put your guns down. I understand that there's videos and tutorials on how to do multicam. However, this approach is what works for me. This isn't the right way. This isn't the only way. I get that there's the multicam function where you can hit 1, 2, or 3. Even with my video speed editor that I have, it will allow me to easily switch between cams on takes. I've run into so many problems with that I like the system that I've created. So hopefully this will make sense for all of you. But if you look on YouTube, as far as dealing with multiple scenes, multiple takes, multiple cameras, and time code with an external recorder, the videos that you see on there for Multicam Davinci don't cover this. This is the only video, at least at the time of this recording, where something like this is covered. All right, so hopefully it provides value to a lot of you narrative filmmakers that are out there that are filming with multiple cameras, using an external sound recorder. If you look at the videos that are on YouTube right now, what they do is they'll take an iPhone, or they'll take, multiple phones or multiple cameras on the desk. Each camera is configured to record the sound, but none of the videos that you see talk about the system, the configuration within DaVinci Resolve when there's an external sound recorder. All right, so anyway, I am looking for any feedback, any comments that you have on my system. If there's another way that you found to make this work with an external sound recorder versus the individual cameras recording sound, which obviously wouldn't happen on a set, right? The YouTubers who are covering multicam in those videos are setting up their cameras within their studio, within their YouTube studio. They're using an iPhone, they're using, a DSLR. But when you're on a set filming a TV show, or a feature film, you're not going to be using the microphone built into the camera. So anyway, it's a lot easier when those camera sources that you're switching between in DaVinci are recording sound. But what if you have an external sound recorder? So this is what works for me. All right. So I've laid out an example here where you have multiple scenes. All right. So this is going to be scene 1 through like 50 within our TV show or film. You're going to have multiple takes, right? So within each take, I have each camera on its own swim lane within DaVinci Resolve. So as you know, there's video layers and then there's sound layers. That's basically what I have diagrammed out here. So I have cam A, cam B, and cam C, each on their own video layer. And then what I do is I use the razor blade tool and I cut between the different cameras, allowing me to use the same sound file for all 3 cameras. Because if it's the same take number and it's the same scene number, going in there and individually fishing out each sound for each person talking is going to create a lot of overhead. It's going to waste a lot of time. Whereas if you organize it up front, you spend all the time organizing it up front, it will pay dividends in the end. It's my favorite quote from Abraham Lincoln. If I had 8 hours to cut down a tree, I'd spend 6 hours sharpening my axe, right? So this is that sharpening of the axe. It's taking your time to lay out all of the different camera angles for each take number, for each scene, and being able to only use one sound file for each take across all 3 cameras. That way, if I want to flip between this person talking, maybe this is on one particular talent, that one's focused on another talent, and all 3 of these people are having a conversation, or maybe it's 2 people talking and camera C is an establishing shot, it's a wide shot. I can easily cut between these 3 angles using the same sound file and cutting across these 3 angles. So hopefully this works for you. This is what you are going to see within DaVinci Resolve as we dive into that right now. For those of you who are wondering what the inserts are, that's going to be your stock video footage that I'll download for establishing a scene. If I didn't get any establishing shots of the outside of the house or the office building, I'll just go grab something off of stock video that doesn't look stock. All right, so this is how my layout is. I take every scene, I organize it from scene all the way to the end. I organize it by take number and order, and then I just start putting every camera angle down on the timeline and then line it up with that particular sound. And then I'll do, I'll align it with the sound because we're using the Deity TC1 time codes on all of the cameras as well as my Mix Pre 10. So for those of you who haven't seen the video yet, that's our hardware stack on set is an Arri, a red V-Raptor, a red Komodo, and then for sound mixing, I use the Sound Devices Mix Pre 10, and then we have Sennheiser lavalier mics and a boom. So we have quite a lot of assets to deal with on the timeline. All right, so hopefully this makes sense. All right, so as I mentioned, I am using Davinci Resolve 18.6. I have my Wacom and my stylus. So I have every single one of our shows organized into different folders. So here we're going to be using Dark Ops as the footage for this video today. And I need to spend some time cleaning up house, but I've got stuff just kind of thrown around everywhere. All right, we're going to go to episode 5, which is China White, which is the most recent. And then we're going to load up stream copy. So I'll create 2 copies of a film. I'll create one for DCP, and that's going to have a completely different sound configuration, obviously for movie theater releases. We are a studio signed with AMC Theaters, and we've had several red carpet movie premieres at AMC, and I've had to master that for DTS 5.1. And it has specific settings when you export it to DCP. So I have a completely separate project in Davinci for the theatrical release of China White and then the streaming release of China White on streaming services. All right, so now let's go ahead and I'm going to reposition my video window. Hopefully it won't get in the way too much. If it does, I'll just keep moving it around. Let's load up my timeline and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about with the layout of the videos and the sound files. Here we have China White. You can see, let me zoom out on the timeline. Here you have the opener, which is basically what plays before the show opens. And I'll put that either on an insert track or I'll put it on track A, kind of float between different configurations, but you get the idea here. So we have all of the A-cam footage, and I will name the swim lanes. I will name the channels where things go, just so I'm reminded of it. So let's start. You know what? Let's go all the way to my folder structure. Let's start there. Okay, I'm going to go over everything. So definitely use chapters and jump around if any of this is boring to you. I'll create an A roll. Right, and you can see here we're using Cloud Sync, and this is something I'm working through. Have any of you noticed that not all of the proxies will get uploaded to the Blackmagic cloud? I'm struggling with that right now, and I have a ticket open with Blackmagic right now on this, but for some reason it's not cloud syncing all of the proxies. And yes, we do have the more expensive packages giving us more space to be able to hold both originals as well as proxies, but I'm having trouble getting all the proxies to sync, as you can see here. Anyway, put in the comments if you know what's going on. All right, so I'll create an A-roll directory, which is where all of our footage from the Alexa go. So here you can see all of the different shots from the Alexa. Then we have a B-roll. This is the red V-Raptor. So you can see the red V-Raptor footage here. So I'm very OCD. You'll notice that about me as we get to know each other. And you see more and more of my tutorials. I'm very OCD when it comes to organization, making sure that there's a place for everything and everything goes in its place. All right. So this is the V-Raptor footage. C-Cam will switch between the Komodo and the DJI Ronin 4D. We do have a DJI Ronin 4D, which we use for follow shots where we're following talent up or down. You can see we're following, what's her name? Arya. So you can see here our camera op. I think this was, who was this? Was this Julio? I think it was Julio, where you can see Julio is moving with the talent up and down the stairs. And to get a much smoother shot, we're using the Ronin 4D. All right. So depending on the actual scene, we'll switch between the C-Cam being either the Ronin 4D or a Komodo. All right, so here you can see the shootout scene. There's a lot of spoilers here. China White has not come out yet, so all of you can consider yourselves lucky. You are getting first access footage access to the footage for China White before it's released. So this is the shootout scene. Clearly, this is the Ronin 4D. This is me down here with the paintball gun. Okay, all of you are probably wondering, what the hell are you doing, Alyssa? I've got a paintball gun, and we purchased the bullet hits from, it wasn't Action VFX. I'm trying to remember where we bought them, but you can buy these VFX shots. They're basically like filled with gasoline. They're filled with Vaseline. So when you shoot at a window, the Vaseline, it explodes and it looks like glass is flying everywhere. It is super cool, and it's got glitter inside. So when all of you actually see the final version of the show, you'll see that with the visual effects. I did all the VFX on this episode, by the way. I basically simulated that window being shot. I'll go and hit play, where, it looks like bullets are actually cracking that window because of those bullet hits, because of and you could see it right there on the window. I don't know if all of you saw that. Let me zoom in. Stop. Let me zoom in on that for all of you. Can you see that? That's the Vaseline hit. So it's got glitter and Vaseline, and when you shoot a window, it looks like a bullet flew through that window. Isn't that cool? That's so cool. Okay, so yeah, anyway, so this is the CCam, and then I create a folder for the visual effects. This is gonna be anything like here, this is the saw machine gun from the helicopter. This is all of my VFX that we've purchased and added in. This is gun smoke, so when a gun is firing, you'll see that gun smoke come out. Okay, so within the sound folder, I'll create a subfolder called DLG. And this is all of my dialogue. So all of these are the wave files from the mix pre-10, but this is all of the sound from that. Then you have music, ambiance, Foley, sound effects, ADR, if we needed to do any ADR. And then we have the original score from our composer, Ron Garcia, and then our post shots. This is going to be like, for example, any office ambiance and gunshots, then any post-production that we had to do on the sound footage. All right, so let's go back to the timeline. Let me quickly show you what's happening here. There are some additional swim lanes or channels. I call them swim lanes, but there's additional channels that I've created here outside of the diagram that I showed you, just because obviously it's nuanced. Every episode's different, but I create a swim lane just for text. So if there's any credits that we roll through, I'll put those credits on their own timeline, on their own channel or swim lane. So that's important that I separate that out. Here you can see my inserts and then my CCam, BCam, and ACam. Down here, let me expand this out. Down here are all of the sound files. So this is where I told you, I'll organize them all by take number and scene number. And then based on what's going on at that particular scene, I'll use that sound file. So I don't have to go in there and fish for sound files from each individual person for the same take number. That just it's nonsensical to me to do that and waste a lot of time. All right. I got some broken images there. Probably need to delete my render cache. Okay, so let's go ahead and go into color grading. How about that? Are all of you down with that? Did all that editing make sense? All right. So, for example, if I want to, let me take, for example, if you look at C footage, this is the same take number. I can still use the same sound file and just expand that out. And I don't have to worry about going in there and fishing for sound files because I know that that's the same take and same sound file that was shot at that time. So it just makes things a lot easier and a lot quicker. Put in the comments if you have any questions on this, but it's pretty straightforward. The editing section of the last video could have probably been a lot shorter, but I really wanted to go into detail on everything regarding my workflow and editing. So I'll drag and drop the ACam footage, BCam footage within the media tab. Within the media tab, I'll go in here and I'll go into list view and I'll set all of the scene numbers and take numbers for each individual file. You can see it here on the right. So if you don't see the scene number and take number in this table, which makes it a lot easier, right click on the headers and then add it. So here I can click on scene and then I can go ahead in here and click on take and then have those appear in my table. And then it's a heck of a lot easier and faster than modifying the fields here in these individual fields. I can just quickly go in here and change that scene number to 3 or 3 or 4 or 5, whatever it may be, and just fill all of these in. And then once I go into the edit timeline, it's a lot easier to find your footage once you've marked it. I know that these are all the scene 1, take 1, scene 2, take 2. I just can quickly, easily grab them and then drag and drop them onto the timeline. Fusion will be another video. All right, so this is the color window. Let's first talk about this over here. I have 3 different stills that I've taken and I put them in a gallery called Night Studios, which is a power gallery. It just makes it available to all of my films, all of our shows. No matter what show I'm in, I will see this Night Studios folder and I will see all of my individual stills that I captured. And to capture a still, meaning that you want to grab all of these nodes to be able to apply it to future clips, you can just right click in this area and click grab still, right? Do you see that? See how it just grabbed it? Let me delete that because I don't want that in there. Okay, so for my stills, I keep it simple. I have 3 stills. I have a pre, a post, and a clip. This is the grouping that I talked about. All right, so I can take all of these clips down here and you can see, do you all see that green little link there? That means that all of these clips are a member of the same group. Now, different people will have a different approach to this as far as how they group things. Some people will group everything by the same scene. If it's the same scene, they'll put it in the same group. I don't do that because just because you've shot all of these different angles in the same scene doesn't mean the lighting is the same. It doesn't mean that that camera didn't move. So I will create different groups based on the lighting conditions, based on the angle of the cameras, based on the locality. So here under groups, you can see, and the screenwriter created these groups that I conform to the traditional screenwriting vernacular of int for interior and ext for exterior. So you can see exterior, desert, and then lab, and that's the drug lab in this episode. And then interior house, dining, interior, exterior desert, shootout. So I can move any one of these clips to a different group. And then when I'm in the pre-group, if I make any changes to luminosity or if I make any changes to the balance, to the color balance, it's gonna affect every single one of these. So let's do that together. All right, let me go to my primaries, and under the balance, I'm going to just crank up that red. All right, do you see that? Now, look, everyone look at the timeline down here. Did you see how every clip turned red? That's because they are all part of the same group and I'm in the pre-group, all right? It is possible to accidentally go in here and right click on clip and say, apply to that group, and it'll grab all of those nodes from the clip level and put them in your pre-group. So make sure that you know where you are at all times. I've done this. It screws up the image. It's not good. Don't do it. Just know where you are at any given time, and then we will go ahead and undo that. So again, you're talking about possibly hours, saving hours on having to go on there and adjust the luminosity for every single clip when they're all shot at the same time, same angle, same lighting, nothing changed. Why make it difficult for yourself? Work smart, not hard. You'll hear me say that a lot. Here, we've adjusted the color balance. You can see that. So here's another a tip for you. If you want to know what changes have been applied to a node, just hover your mouse over it and it will tell you what changed on it. This is something that took me a while to actually find. I didn't actually know about this right away. It took me a while, but for example, you see a little icon there. It means that a change has been made to that node. So if any of you are looking at your nodes, you're like, what did I change here? I can't remember what I changed. What did I modify? Just hold your mouse arrow over it and it'll tell you what's changed. Okay, so why don't we do this? Let's all grade from the very beginning of a scene. Let's use Jeremiah. This is a good scene to play with. All right, let's reset all grades and nodes on the clip level. All right, did you see how big of a difference that was? So let me undo that, right? And you can see what my final grade looked like in color correction. And then if I reset all grades and nodes and delete all of those changes, you can see how blown out that window is, right? Even though this was shot, what camera is this? Oh, by the way, it will tell you what camera. So this is a red R3D RAW file. Here you can see this is an ARRI RAW. So this is the Red V-Raptor. The Red V-Raptor has 17 stops of dynamic range, which means that I should be able in post be able to recover that data in that window. So we covered the groups, right? So at the pre-group level, let me show you my changes. I have changes for luminosity and balance. Oops, doubled up on that. Ooh, did you see all that? Wow. Okay. So again, know what you're doing and what window you're in whenever you are working within your groups. I didn't make any changes to luminosity. You can just hold it and Davinci will tell you over that hover that no correction has been applied. I did make some changes to the primary wheels under for balance in this balance node. So here, if I click on my primary wheels, you can see sort of the changes that were made here in the primaries wheels to be able to really correct that image. If I hit D, you all see that? See it? Command D will disable or enable a particular node, but it's very minute, but hopefully you can catch it. Look at the wall over here, everyone. Do you see that wall? It's kind of got a teal kind of color cast. It's not really white. It's sort of like almost there's just a little too much blue going on. It's very teal. So if I so that's it. That's the original file, right? So if I restore that with the changes, you can see I've brought a little bit more correction to it where it looks a little bit more white, right? So that's the pre-group level. If you look at the post group level, we don't have anything in post for this particular group of clips, all right? There's nothing going on in post. So all of the corrections, right, are going to be done at that clip level. So if I right click over here and say apply grade, all right, this is my still that I captured. If I apply grade, it's going to give me my node tree, all right? So let me reposition my video window so all of you guys can see, guys and girls can see. In all of these, everyone can see. So let's move this over. Let's see, it looks like that's as far as it'll go. This is the one thing I hope they fix. It would be really nice to be able to pop out this node tree. Give me a thumbs up in the comments and let me know if you agree, but I think I should be able to pop this out and place it on an external monitor. This is a real pain in the butt because it gets to a point where you can't expand this anymore. That's actually not that bad. This is an XDR display, by the way. But when your node tree gets totally out of control and you've got just a whole shit ton of nodes, that can get a little crazy. All right, so here is your ingest from the pre-group level. So any changes that you made in pre will get carried over to here. And then again, like I told you earlier in the PowerPoint, this is all sort of FIFO, first in, first out, meaning it's all serial. So order matters here. So if we want, we can just sort of bring down the luminosity in this. So, we can do that. I usually like to use my custom curves. Now, custom curves, the curves are actually color space aware. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but basically it respects the native color space. So here, if I bring down, let me explain this, by the way. Make sure if you're going to be here in curves and you want to just affect luminosity, that you uncheck that link and it will make sure that you've only got that luminosity selected, that lightness selected. So you can bring that, just that line up and down without modifying all of the colors. What happens is that if you leave that clicked, it'll bring RGB down with it. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to affect the luminosity of that. So let's uncheck that and we'll grab that and then we'll just kind of bring this down, right? Now, some of you are wondering where my scopes are. I actually have an iPad right here and I'm using Sidecar with my iPad. I had a bunch of the Apple Studio displays, which I moved into our other studio, and I just used my iPad. It's actually a pretty cool setup. I need to do a walkthrough video again of my studio, but basically I have all of my scopes right here underneath the camera, which has all four of my scopes: the parade, the waveform, the vector scope, and the histogram. All right, so because I'm doing a tutorial video, I'll drag this over here so all of you can see this. For those of you who are new to color grading, you really don't understand the parade and the waveforms. Is anything white means that it's perfectly balanced. It means that you've got everything in balance in those white areas. And then anything where some of you are wondering, hey, Alyssa, how do you know if something is clipping and it's blown out? Watch what happens if I bring this all the way up. We're clearly clipping, right? It's going above that 1023 line. And we'll talk about 18% gray. I'll talk about the 18% gray line. That is something we should definitely cover, but I'll get into that later. But here you can see in my parade in my waveform, all of those red, green, blue areas are all going above that 1023 line. It means that those are being clipped, right? And then vice versa, if I take the line and I then move it, look at that. I mean, clearly we're clipping. We don't want to deliver that to the client. So, you know, what you want to do is try and get as close as you can to that 0 line in your lift gamma gain. This is kind of pretty much doing the same thing. I want to make that clear. There is no right or wrong way to do this. It's not like, for those of you who prefer curves, would sit there and say, oh, anyone who uses the wheels, they're doing it wrong. The curves are bad. It's just preference. There's no right or wrong way to do this. I like working with the curves, and then, you know, you can do splicing, but I prefer the curves. I will go in here and get crazy. You know, got my mini panel, of course, and I'll do individual changes. For those of you who've never seen the mini panel, you have little knobs where you can actually isolate the reds, greens, blues, and the luminosity and change them with knobs and just affect the red. It's basically like printer lights, and I got a lot of compliments on that. Thank you, by the way. On the last video, I will talk about printer lights. We'll get into that, but I will use the primaries wheels. But one of the things I want to make clear to all of you is that if you click the HDR, and I don't know why more YouTubers don't talk about this. Do all of you notice that? There's YouTube, a lot of the YouTubers won't cover the HDR wheels. It's very rare to see that. Most people are here. Now, one thing that you need to know is that these are color space aware. So you're going to get much finer, less broken images. It's if you're going to be using your HDR wheels. So for example, maybe you don't want to use the curves and you want to just affect the exposure, and go here and click that reset button. And I can come over here and say, you know what, this is super overexposed. I'm going to go over here to my color space aware tools, my HDR wheels, and I'm just going to bring that exposure down. You see how it's very nice. It's making some really sexy, really smooth, buttery changes to that image. Do all of you see that? See how we're also recovering more detail in that window? This is the beauty of shooting with a red camera or an Arri. You have a lot of information in those highlights and those shadows that you can recover, right? So I spend a lot of my time in the HDR wheel. So now I think that looks pretty good. We'll kind of stop maybe like right about there. Now, we talked about power windows in the PowerPoint. Before I get to the power windows, let's go through the rest of my node tree. So here in color balance, now that we've got the luminosity about where we want it. By the way, I want to make sure all of you are aware of this. You want to make sure that you take your qualifier tool and that it's turned on, that you can go here into settings. Make sure you have a check mark next to display qualifier focus, and it'll put a little circle on here representing where the specific colors are. So for example, if I put my arrow here, or you know, the qualifier tool here, right? Do all of you see what's happening in the waveform and in the parade area? It's highlighting where in the scope that particular part of the image is. If everyone can watch that waveform section, this blob of colors right here, that's Paul. That's Paul Cervenka, right? That's for those of you who don't know the character names, that's the actor's name, Paul Cervenka. So this is Paul right here in that scope. So for example, if I put here, you can see clearly that's a blue suit. You can see that blue line is much higher than the other colors, which means that it's going to be a lot more blue. Whereas if I try and modify that, you know, and bring up the reds or bring up the greens, we're clearly going to have an issue where that will balance out and become more gray, right? So if I go here, or if I go to my primaries wheels, I'll try not to use my mini panel too much, since all of you can see I don't have my overhead camera on. But for example, if I go over here into offset, and I just, you know, bring that red up. All right, just watch the suit. I get that it's going to screw up the rest of the image, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But you know, here, right, it's not as blue, right? I'm really affecting the color balance here, and that's his suit it's a lot more gray, right? It's not as blue. I mean, you see blue in there, but you know, we can definitely bring our blues down, and then look what happens. Red and green become dominant, right? Now we are affecting the entire shot. I get that, but I just wanted to prove a point. So let's let's undo that. We don't want to do that. The other thing is that if you notice, and this is something that, you know, colorists that spend decades doing color grading, they'll make the same mistake. They'll be on the wrong node and they'll make changes. So the reason behind naming each one of these nodes is because I only want to affect the luminosity on the loom node. So I am, especially if I'm tired, I've been grading all day, 12 hours, 15 hours of grading, I'll forget to switch over to the balance, and I'll just start making changes on the loom tab. It's okay. It's not going to be the end of the world. But what will happen is that you'll have your luminosity adjustments, you know, your exposure adjustments, and your color balance on the same node. All right. So you want to separate that. You want to be mindful of when you switch to saying, okay, hey, you know what, Alyssa, I really like the exposure where it's at. Let's just keep it. Next, you want to do color balance. And if you notice, my node tree actually follows very closely to what I sort of taught you earlier in the PowerPoint for my color pipeline, right? So this reminds me of everything that I should take care of, everything that I should do in color correction and grading, all right? So here, you know, if we wanted to change the color balance, if it was off, if it doesn't look natural, right? If it really doesn't, if skin tones don't look natural, let's talk about skin tones. So let's take a look at our vector scope right here. Make sure in your vector scope you've got show 2x zoom. I like that. I mean, it's not the end of the world if you don't, but and then the most important thing here is show skin tone indicator. This is an indicator line that will tell you where skin tones typically live on humans. It's where it gives you sort of a GPS or a guide to know whether or not your skin tones are natural looking. And if they fall on that line, it's a great way to determine whether or not you've got perfectly balanced skin tones. So, you know, if I take the offset here, for example, we're going to affect the whole image. But if you notice, that blob of white is way off. Clearly, because Paul looks like a Smurf, that is not. And by the way, it will actually show you on the vector scope as well where you're pointed. You know, clearly that's not a natural looking image. And then we can just kind of, we can adjust it back and pull it back a little bit more cyan. These letters correspond to the colors. So magenta, blue, cyan, green, and then yellow, and then red. So, you know, as you make adjustments and you want to pull it towards a certain direction, you can use those color names as a guide where I can go totally cyan, and totally green, go totally yellow, magenta, then you can see blue, right? Okay. So you typically want to be right there in the crosshairs. Make sure your skin tones are nicely aligned with the skin tone line. You can see we've got some nice, here, if you look over here, the window is clearly right here in the waveform, right? And you see how really nicely white that is? It means all those colors are lined up and you've got perfectly white whites. If you want to, you can, you know, bring those up or adjust those. Or let's say, for example, you kind of want to do this more of an orange and teal look in your lifts and your, you know, in your shadows. You can bring that down. And then in your midtones, right? Which is where skin lives, you can bring in that orange, right? There you go. So if you kind of wanted the orange and teal look, you could do that and have a little fun with it. But we're not going to do that. All right, so we'll get into split toning and stuff like that, but you want to make sure that your image it looks as natural as possible, that you've got that luminosity right, you've got that, you know, everything's properly exposed. And then remember, we're only doing color correction first. I know you want to get excited and jump right into grading, but you want to get that color correction down. So we want to make sure that our image is properly balanced. I think I want to bring this a little bit lower. All right, I can use my curves to do that, like right there. And then remember, because we're on the clip line, we're only affecting this one clip, right? And then now I want to recover a lot of that information in the window. All right, so how do I do that, right? I don't like, I mean, if there's information out there or partial information, we're not purposely blowing out a window by shooting light through it. You know, I really want to recover that information to make it look more natural, right? We can use actually the spotlight for that. Let's do that. Let me get rid of this. Let's go over to our power windows. And then in my spotlight node, I can come in here. And I can affect the feathering, right? Make sure it looks a little bit less, sharp. It's more feathered, more feathery. And then now we can go over here to our color aware, and then we can start bringing down that exposure. Now pay particularly close attention to the window. Watch the windows. We bring this exposure down. Look at that. Look at how we've recovered a lot of that, even that, just the dimensionality, the material of that stucco wall behind him. It's great, right? We just bring this exposure down. We can keep bringing it down until we're happy with it. And what else have I done here? Do all of you notice what else I've done? In addition to recovering the details in that window, what else have I affected? Do you notice now also that your eye now is drawn more towards Jeremiah, right? More towards Paul, where not everything is evenly lit. And again, you can come in and you can bring in your vignette. Again, make sure that got your window right. Oh, by the way, for those of you who've never used Power Windows before, anything grayed out in that node is what's not going to be affected. Think of it kind of like a piece of paper that's blocking from modifications being made to that area. So here I can go into the vignette. I can set my vignette. And then here we can see a little bit more attention is being drawn to Paul. Remember, you don't want to overkill. Just don't overkill. This is very, very new colorist, very sort of newbie. You just don't do it. Don't overkill stuff. Just little goes a long way in color grading, right? And here we can even go in and say, okay, let's say, for example, see if you move that, look what happens, right? So you can see what's being done by that spotlight window to draw the audience's attention to Jeremiah. And then if we disable that node, you can see kind of what's happening, right? We're getting way more detail. I'll go full screen. Get way more detail being brought back into that window. And we're drawing attention to Jeremiah's face, where we want our audience's focus is to be on his face while he's talking, knowing that the supporting actor here, Casey, is not who we really want to focus the audience's attention on. It's really Jeremiah and his dialogue. So you can keep playing with Power Windows. I love using Power Windows. It's super important to me to make sure that I'm drawing the audience's attention where I want it. That's just vital to storytelling, right? And capturing and holding that audience's attention. All right, so once we go through all that, again, you can set your qualifiers. That's another thing you can do. And your qualifier tab is right here. All right, so let's say, for example, I want to affect just this one area of the house. Let's do yellow for my taste, right? So if you take your qualifier and you click on that area, it's going to show you in the qualifier tab sort of what you're clicking on. Or you could go in here and you can actually add to it and draw an additional, draw something additional there. So here, if you click on this icon, you can see what you're affecting. And remember I said earlier, anything grayed out means you're not affecting it. Now let's say, so here we're clearly only affecting this particular area. We are getting some of her because she's blonde and it matches that same sort of area of the color spectrum. So we can go in here and if we want, we can even invert selections. If you want to feather subtract or subtract, you can do that, right? So here, did you see what just happened? I'm adding or taking away from that selection, and you see as I add more, it's bringing in his face. We really don't want that. So let's go back here. Let's say we only really want to get this area for now. For purposes of this tutorial, I'll leave it as is. Know about these buttons, by the way. Just know what they do. Know that if you want to see what, a particular area of the qualifier you're affecting, that you need to click on that to see what's being highlighted. And now that I've just grabbed that area, and by the way, we can even modify that. So if we wanted to include less or more, we can modify that by adjusting these tabs. Now that we have everything we want, and again, you can sort of adjust your black clips and your white clips depending on what you want to include or not include. So for example, let me show you how that changes things. Do you see the changes that are happening to Casey's hair? Basically, see how feathered that's becoming? So, and even in the frame of the windowsill, you can see that the clean whites are affecting that significantly. If I drag the black clip, look at that. And we're getting a more clean selection now. Now she's not being affected, and we're grabbing everything else that we want in that window. So now that we've done that, let's play with that color. So, we can either we can be in the color space where, or we can just go to the offset, and we can look at that. Look at that. Look at that. I'm not really affecting much except where I want, which is the outside window. Let's say, for example, I just hate the color yellow. I don't want to see any yellow. I can play with that offset or any of the other color wheels or primary wheels and change that. All right, let's see. What else should we cover in today's lesson? So we covered color theory, we covered editing, color grading. I think the vignette spotlight, the top bottom, clearly that's affecting only the bottom area. I think it's all pretty self-explanatory. Let me see. We talked about groups. If you want, we can go check out the post group of another part of the film. We go over here. Got a lot of broken images. If we come over here, we can go into the post group, and you can see what I'm doing here. I'm not done color grading China White for the new version of the grade, so you can see that these are more complete, and this matches up with the PowerPoint from earlier. So we have the ODT, where I'm using the timeline color space, input and output color space in the gamma, and then I'm applying any glow, halation, or grain to that image, right? Okay, man, kind of tired. I don't know if any of you saw that live stream that I did earlier on character. Was it character development today? I'm tired. All right, so we'll get into the other areas of the cover page of the color page in the next video. I'll also talk about going into the. Well, let me move my video window. Going into the project settings. For those of you who are wondering what my project settings look like for color management, these are my settings. I tend to gravitate more towards Davinci YRGB color managed, Davinci wide gamut, intermediate. And so what it does when you're using these settings is Davinci will automatically detect what the input color space and gamma is. And as you can see here, it did a great job at detecting that. And I don't need to go in here and create extra work for myself into the pre-node and then change the IDT. Okay, I don't have to do that. I don't have to set, this is a red camera. And then watch what happens if I try and do that. So if I go red, white, gamut, you see how all those got affected. And then if I go to red LG310, look at that. See, because what's happening is we're doing a color correction on top of a color correction. There's no point. As a matter of fact, you'll break your image. You'll do some damage if you're setting color space transform when you've got Davinci managed set. So be really careful. Know what you're doing and why. If your image looks all funky and wonky and you can't figure out what's causing it, look for things like that where you're probably doing a grade on top of a grade, or a correction on top of a correction. All right, I guess if I were using IDT, I can quickly show you my post group where, I can then convert that back into a Rec 709 Rec 709 color space for delivery, and then apply the glow halation and grade, and then we're off to the races. I do use Facetune. I don't know if you can all see this. Here, sorry, I called it Facetune. Oh my God, I can't believe I said that. That's a mobile app for social media for making yourself look all airbrushed. I think people overdo it with that, but if you go to your filters and you click on face refinement, not Facetune, refinement, you can see where I've used this. So face refinement cannot be done at a pre or post level. You can only do it at an individual clip level. If I go here and I plop this, for example, on the director, my director node, because I, as the director, want to see more of an airbrushed look on Anna's face, I can plop the face refinement node there, and then if you hit analyze, it's going to analyze it and hopefully grab an accurate outline of her face, and then you can then go in there, remove the overlay. And this is what I was talking about in my PowerPoint about zooming in, knowing what you're doing and what you're affecting. And then we can go in here and we can do what's called eye retouching, okay? So we can go in here and you can see that. Do you see? Look at it, look at below her eyes. So I'm bringing in some light in case anyone has raccoon eyes, you can get rid of those raccoon eyes. You can see that she has some eye bags. Check this out, everybody. Watch this. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Oh my God, that's amazing. Isn't that great? So, you know, I just, Davinci has so many great built-in tools. I don't know which ones are available in Studio and versus the free. I don't know if face refinement is available in the free version, but if you think about it, Studio's not that expensive, and it's a lifetime purchase. But here you can see I'm getting rid of those bags under her eyes. If I want to smooth out her skin, I can do that. So I can take this, and as you can see, oh, look at that. Oh, look how unrealistic that. Do you know what I'm talking about? You know, I know all of you have seen this. People going on social media like Instagram or whatever and posting videos or photos on Facebook or whatever, and it's just clearly overly face-tuned. That is not real. It looks so bad to me. And it just became a thing. I don't know. I mean, I get it, but I mean, come on. I don't know. Anyway, I won't go down that rabbit hole, but yeah, I mean, you can clearly do some cool sort of retouching here. I don't like to go too much. You know, you want to make it look as authentic and, again, as natural and authentic as possible. People have lines in their face. That's what makes them human. It's the years and wear and tear on living. You know, you get wrinkles, you get lines, and why, as a filmmaker, do you want to get rid of that? So here you could see, like, I've got too much highlights going. The highlights are just crazy. They're like out of control. All right, so let's get rid of a lot of that highlight. Let's bring down the we can bring down the eye bag removal if we want. Just do a little bit. If you want, you can brighten up the light. Oh, look at that. Look how crazy that looks. It doesn't even look, again, no, it doesn't even look natural. But you know, you can get a really cool look, and you can still bring in a little bit of brightness into the eyes without overdoing it. And again, a little goes a long way in color grading. Okay, I got a lot of compliments about the use of printer lights in my last video, so I want to talk about that and go over it with you. I also want to cover a directory structure app that I found called Post Haste that I think a lot of you will enjoy using. It really changed things for me in making sure that I could templatize the directory structure for all of our films, all of our TV shows. Especially in TV series, you've got the subfolders for every single episode, and I like to make sure that every single one of those subfolders has the same organography, if you will, of subfolders. And this app called Post Haste, which is a free download, by the way, will allow you to actually achieve that. So we're going to talk about printer lights, and then I'll talk about the directory structure to help me templatize and make sure that every project has the same folder structure. Okay, so let's talk about printer lights. Printer lights is the way that printing houses, when they would print the film stock, would color grade each and every clip. So as the film was being printed, what the printers would do they would shine varying degrees of red, green, and blue onto the film stock as it was being printed. This was the way they color graded. If you think about it, digital color grading, digital editing within an NLE is a relatively new thing. Hollywood, of course, as all of you know, started out on film cameras, film cinema cameras. The first feature film that was filmed on a digital cinema camera, I think it was called Wind Horse in 1996 out of Tibet. What I love about color grading with printer lights is its very minute changes to your grade. It allows you, for example, if you don't have a mini panel or a micro panel, to be able to use your numlock keypad to be able to color grade your clip and make very small minute changes by adjusting the red, green, and blue. So if you think about it, it's kind of like how they did it back in the old days when they were shining those varying degrees of RGB lights through the film. This is sort of your way of shining that red, green, and blue light through the film, except in a digital way. So I'm going to teach you how to leverage printer lights to make more finite changes to your grade without overly correcting or overly grading your clips with a mouse or with a stylus. So let's go ahead and walk through that configuration. In order to use printer lights, it's not as simple as just using your numlock keypad. You need to make sure you actually enable it within Davinci Resolve. And that's quite simple. When you're in the color tab, you go to the color menu and then scroll down to printer light hotkeys and make sure that that's on. So see, we can see here that there's a check mark next to that it's now enabled. All right, if you look at, let's take one of the clips. Let's use the director one. I'm going to go ahead and reset that node grid. And instead of using my stylus, and instead of using my panel, I'm going to use printer light hotkeys. All right, let me quickly explain the configuration of the keys. To adjust the RGB values and adjust that varying degrees of light that you're shining onto that film, if you will, you're going to use the 4 and 7, 5 and 8, and 6 and 9 keys on your keypad. So I'll go ahead and do that now, and all of you can see how I'm affecting the color. So let's start with red. And let's go ahead and just zoom in a little bit more on our subject's face, on our talent's face. And I'm going to now just bring down that red. Can all of you see that the red on the scopes is clearly moving as I hit that 4 or hit that 7 to bring that red up? Now, my advice, don't just use the numlock key. There is an additional modifier key that you can hold down in order to make even more minute changes than that. And that is actually, if you're on a Mac, holding down the Option key. So as you can see, as I modify the colors, the changes are pretty dramatic, right? They're pretty dramatic. You can see that blue moving up quite a lot by me hitting the 9 and the 6 keys. But if I hold down a modifier key, which is the Command key if you're on a Mac, is if I hold down that key, the changes are a lot smaller. They're not as dramatic. So this is an opportunity for you to go in there and really just make very finite changes without something more dramatic like that. So here I'm holding down the Command key. I apologize. I should have set up my overhead camera, but I didn't do that. But you get the idea here. Okay, so I want to talk about auto white balance. I didn't really cover that earlier. And one of the things that I do, and there's two ways to adjust your white balance. You can use an auto detect feature within Davinci where you find a white point and you use this tool right here. And it's basically an auto white balance tool. And then you find a white point and you click on it and it'll attempt to auto white balance based on that point that you set. Now, I rarely, if ever, use that. I can't actually think of a single time in a production where I used auto white balance. I'll usually only rely on myself to do that. However, I want to show you how to do it just in case some of you want to use this. So there is quite a bit of red in the eyes. If you think about it, in the human eye, there's quite a bit of red. And so I usually don't use the white part of the eye for that. I'll typically use their teeth. The teeth are usually the brightest white point within an image. And if you hold the dropper over the area you want to select, it's possible to even find something that's even wider, but usually I rely on the teeth. So if I click here, did you see that? Did you see how Davinci automatically adjusted that white balance? Now, there's nothing wrong with using that if you want to, but again, I'll typically use the qualifier, the eyedropper, put it over a white point, and then I'll use my waveforms to find out if that's actually truly white. Now, the other reason why I don't like using auto white balance is it's sometimes not accurate. It's sometimes not correct. So as you can see over there in the waveform, there's definitely a lot of blue right there in her teeth, with red coming in just below that and then green. So I want to try and balance that out. And let's use the new printer light keys that I just taught you. So if we want to bring that blue down, let's do that. So that's going to be the 6 key. And I'm just going to start bringing that blue down. Okay, so there's something I want to cover with all of you that I tripped on. It was something that I don't want all of you to make the mistake of. If you notice, even if I move or modify those colors with the printer lights, the blue is clearly going up. But look at the circles from that eyedropper in the waveform. It's not moving. And it's because those circles they're not real time. They don't move as you color grade. So be careful with that. If you're sitting there thinking, okay, wait, I'm bringing up the blue, like Alyssa said, but that blue isn't moving. Why isn't that blue moving? It's because you have to move your eyedropper and it will update. So as you grade, just know that it's not going to update. Unfortunately, you have to move again and then see if that lines up. So let's bring the red up. You can see the red is now moving up a lot more. And then let's bring up the green. You see that? Those circles are now a lot closer together. Now, I talked about using your command key as a modifier. So let's do that. We have more of a better white balanced image now. Now, if you take what I did, right, and then you compare that with if I did an auto white balance, for example, it's pretty damn similar. If you saw that, there really isn't that much of a difference. So I'll do an undo, and then I'll do a redo. So between the auto white balance and what I did manually, it's not that far off. Again, there's nothing wrong with using auto white balance. It's there for a reason. I'll never shame any of you for using a quicker way to do something. Again, work smart, not hard. But here's the thing about it. It's whatever works for your workflow, whatever works for you. There's no wrong way or right way. And don't listen to the trolls and the naysayers who tell you that what you're doing is wrong or it's just what works for you. And ultimately, at the end of the day, as long as your client is happy, as long as you're happy with the final grade and the delivery, that's all that matters. All right. So that's printer lights. Love printer lights. As a matter of fact, that's all I used before I bought my mini panel. So for those of you who don't want to drop the money on the mini or micro panel, use printer lights. It is such a great finite way to color grade. Earlier, I talked about having an established templatized directory structure using a tool called Post Haste. This really has helped me in my workflow and more quickly getting my environment set up for editing or grading a film. Now, as you can see here, I have an established structure for my bins. Now, remember, these bins don't line up exactly to the folder structure on your hard drive. So what you want to do is have some sort of template system that maps up to that. I don't know if any of you have discovered this about DaVinci Resolve, but the relink tool sucks. It sucks. I've had problem after problem with the relink tool. What would happen earlier before I templatized my directory structure, my folder structure is, I would change the name of folders, or it would go from one drive to another because I ran out of space. And it, as you know, it breaks everything within your film. And you have to relink it. Now, one of the things that I found, and I'm waiting for DaVinci Resolve to fix this, but if you move a file from one drive and folder structure to another, when you relink, what happens is it appends that new folder structure on top of the old one instead of doing a replace on it. And so I would have the original folder structure, for example, with Dropbox when we were using remote collaborators. And then it would append the new folder structure and drive on at the end of that. It was the weirdest thing. And the last time I checked it, I haven't checked 18.6, but in the previous version, before 18.6, I that bug was still there. That issue was still there. I don't know. Maybe one of you can comment and let me know if that bug has indeed been fixed or if you've run into it. But I couldn't figure out why these file paths, no matter what I did to try and relink, and yes, I'm aware of the fact that you can change source folder. So there's relink and then there's change source folder. And even if I did a change source folder, it never fixed it. So what I ended up having to do was I would blank this out, or sorry, I would take the two, so the original change from, and I would delete this, and then I would hit change, and then it would blank it out, and then I could go in there and change it to a new drive and folder. It sucks. Let's just avoid these problems altogether with relinking and just use the same directory structure and never change it. And to do that, we can use a tool that's a free available download called Post Haste. And Post Haste, it's pretty simple. You can set a project number or you can define a client, and it just basically modifies the directory structure and prepends that data to it. You could set your date, you could set your editor. I don't do that. So what I did was I created my own custom template called Night Studios, and they have some others to get some ideas from it. But I just wanted to start with a blank project template. I have a main folder called projects, and within projects, I have a subfolder called Dark Ops. And then within that project for Dark Ops, I have Cam A through C, insert sound, ADR, ambience, VFX. And if you look at this folder structure, it actually maps up to my bins. And so it really helps to make sure that one project doesn't use A roll instead of A cam or Cam A, and the next project uses B roll instead of calling it Cam B or B cam. It just templatizes it, and it makes everyone's life easier. And you don't have to worry about what folder you named it before. So check out Post Haste. Again, it's a free download. I want to say it's not posthaste.com. It's Digital Rebellion is the company that develops it. And again, it's a free download from them. And you don't even have to provide your email address. You just hit that download button. And there's a version both for your PC users out there as well as Mac users. All right. Okay, so before we close out on this video, which again, I apologize, it's so long, but I really wanted to make sure I refilmed the edit video and also went into a significant amount of depth and detail in the color grading. Okay, so I want to talk about something regarding the Thunderbolt drives, and I'm hoping this will actually help a lot of you out there because there's no documentation around this issue. There isn't really anyone in the Blackmagic forums talking about this issue, and so I want to raise awareness about it to all of you because even the support engineers I was working with at Blackmagic were dumbfounded by what had happened. So I was having a complete breakdown because I was trying to get a DCP file exported to be able to drop it off at AMC movie theaters for a feature that people were flying in for a red carpet premiere. And the premiere was like 2-3 hours away. And so knowing how long the render was going to take and, get it onto a stick and then drive it out to AMC, I was running out of time. And for some reason, the render kept crashing every time. So it would, it was that moment that I'm sure a lot of you have experienced where DaVinci Resolve will not render. It will just keep incrementing the amount of time and it goes up to days, weeks, months. years, and it just keeps climbing. And there's no error message. There's no crash log. You have to force quit Davinci Resolve and then go back into it and hope and pray that it will render when you try it again, because you just don't know what's causing it. And in trying to troubleshoot it with the support engineers at Blackmagic, I realized what was going on. So for those of you who have a Mac Studio, for those of you who have limited number of Thunderbolt ports, whereas, I guess that's a very subjective comment, but if you only have a few Thunderbolt cables, but you have all of these Thunderbolt SSD DAS drives, like I have, I have the Thunderblade, I have the OWC Mercury Pros that I talked about earlier, and then I have all of these other devices all connected over USB-C or Thunderbolt. I've exceeded the number of ports that I have in my Mac Studio. So what did I do? What would all of you do? You would go out there and you would buy the best Thunderbolt hubs, right? Well, I've got these really nice OWC Thunderbolt hubs that I hooked up to my Mac Studio. Now, what had happened was my Thunderblade and my Mercuries were actually connected to the Thunderbolt hubs that were connected to my Mac Studio. And there is something within Davinci Resolve that hates that when it's got a render. So it was actually causing the render to crash. And even looking at the logs, Davinci Resolve was, there was nothing in the logs that was being generated by Davinci Resolve when it crashed that the support engineers at Blackmagic could decipher to figure out what was causing it. So what I did was I just decided to disconnect everything from my Mac Studio. Nothing was connected to it except my monitor. Then what I did was I took the individual the Thunderblade and the Mercuries, and I connected them directly to my Mac Studio instead of connecting them to a Thunderbolt hub. And wouldn't you know, it rendered. I got on my knees and praised the Lord, and I burned the stick, and then I got the DCP to the theater in time. I kid you not, I literally dropped it off for them to ingest into their projectors like 30 minutes before the premiere was supposed to run. So it was a traumatic experience that I'm still seeing therapy for, but I'm hoping that helps one of you. If any of you have your originals for your project connected to an external drive, do not connect it to a USB hub. Directly connect it to your computer, because the only thing that we could think of as far as why it was causing it was when Davinci is taking all of these originals and processing them, and you're doing it across multiple drives that are being shoved into a single port because of that hub, you're exceeding the bandwidth limitations of that port. Now, should Davinci have some sort of air condition or something to prevent that from happening? Sure, of course, yes. If I could get into a room with the developers, I would talk to them about this and hope it gets fixed. But there's nothing that indicated that that was the problem and the issue. So I don't know if Davinci Resolve in its latest version has that fixed. If Blackmagic fixed that bug, I don't want to try it. So I'm leaving everything directly connected to my Mac Studio, but it's something for all of you to check out on your systems. Best practice, just do not connect any external drives when you've got originals on there. Do not connect them to a Thunderbolt or a USB-C hub. It's a bad idea. All right, so that's it. That's it for this video. That's it for this episode. Hopefully all of you, whether you're a senior colorist or a new colorist or you're just getting into it, hopefully all of you learned at least one thing, and I'm happy. If you learned at least one thing in this video, whether it's on the editing side or on the color grading side, then awesome. Tell me about it in the comments. Let's continue the conversation in the comment thread of this video. But until I see you in the next episode, I want to leave you with one final thought. One of the things that I always wondered was, can you color grade with proxies? You would think that this is, something that's obvious. For those of you who don't know what proxies are a copy, if you will, of an original file that would be 2 gigs or 4 gigs in size. With a proxy is a couple hundred megs or 100 megs. It's a lot smaller. It allows you to be able to send exact copies of your clips to a remote editor or camera to cloud, whatever it may be, or not even provide the originals at all. Just give all of the proxies to your remote editor to be able to use that to cut and edit the film. But when you are in that mode, when you're doing remote collaboration in that project, proxies are enabled, right? So your editor is working off proxies. They're going to set prefer proxies on the timeline. Now, if you're not paying attention and seeing that you've actually got proxies enabled on your clips, the new version of 18.6, Davinci Resolve does a better job of showing you that what you're working with is an actual proxy. So if I lower my video window here, there's actually a new button here too. That's new. Prefer proxies. See, they add this like little purple thing there. It wasn't immediately evident. They had a different icon in previous versions, but there was no color to it and it didn't really pop out as much as it does now in 18.6. But make sure that you are not color grading with proxies, because it is not possible. You will see broken images. You won't understand, no matter if you use your HDR wheels, you know, your log, whatever, that it just looks crappy. It's because you're probably grading with a proxy. So make sure that your proxies are disabled once you get into the color tab. So that's it. I leave all of you to your own devices. Take care of yourselves and each other.